All right. Well, really, mostly what I want to do here today is hear from these three incredible guests who, to me, really represent the spectrum of what we're talking about. Ebony, our families, our kids, our moms in such desperate need of help. Mayor Mike Taylor, our governments, our states, our counties, our townships, our cities, who have been there on the front line since day one, however much overtime, first responders, needing tests, all the problems. And then Kerry, he's going to tell you about how his line of business essentially was decimated by this, and we must help them. But first, let me just take a second to try to make sense of where we are. So we passed the HEROES Act back in mid-May, over 4 months ago. And the Senate hasn't passed anything. And the president and the Senate say they want to compromise, or they say we won't compromise. Okay, so on October 1st, we passed a big, big compromise. We came down $1 trillion and passed a modified HEROES Act that still helps the American people in a lot of crucial ways, but meets them halfway. And then we came down another couple $100 billion. And so we really are serious about rushing relief to the American people. I mean, look what's happened in just the last week. American Airlines, United Airlines, Regal Cinemas, so many different kind of companies, people being laid off by the thousands. And the number of cases is ticking up, up, up around the country. It's higher than it was when we shut down in the spring. So we really have to come to agreement. But then what does the president do? Yesterday he said, no more negotiations. He's done with it. Just wait till after the election. I just can't believe how callous that is. And here Jerome Powell is, the Republican head of the Federal Reserve that Donald Trump appointed, saying that we need to rush aid to the American people and we should err on the side of big, not small. So we are here ready to compromise. And I just want to highlight what we did pass on October 1st briefly, because it's so important. First of all, testing, contact tracing, and treatment. We have $75 billion in there, including key provisions of my Coronavirus Containment Corps Act to stand up a contact tracing army for our country. But we probably need a couple 100,000 people. And you know what? If we did that, all of them reflecting the diversity of their communities, working under the control of their local health departments for HIPAA reasons, it would be so patriotic. It would be something they'd never forget for the rest of their lives. They would help lick this pandemic, and they could go on and have great careers in public health, customer service, whatever. We strengthened food security, including my bipartisan bill, the COVID-19 WIC Safety and Modernization Act, to push for ways to enhance safety and access to food for families who rely on the special supplemental nutrition program for WIC, the Women's, Infants, and Children's Program, like flexible solutions so they can purchase food online, have curbside pickup or delivery, like what everybody else has access to. And Ebony's going to speak to that in a little bit here. It sends stabilization funds to states and all of our local governments, counties, townships, and cities, every single one. And I've been calling for that since we introduced the Coronavirus Community Relief Act a long time ago. And it provides the resources our local governments need for essential workers. The state of Michigan would get $7.4 billion in stabilization funds, and Sterling Heights would get $35 million. And Mayor Taylor will speak about that. It includes strong support for small businesses, including an updated and improved PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, but also, and I stress this, we're making it better, friends. We're learning targeted assistance for independent restaurants and for independent venues like comedy clubs and music venues. And Carrie is going to speak to that in a few minutes. It includes more funds to bolster education and childcare. $225 billion broken down like this: $182 billion for K-12, $39 billion for post-secondary education, our great state universities and colleges, and $57 billion to support childcare, which Lord knows families need right now more than ever. It also delivers another direct payment to everybody, $1,200 per taxpayer and $500 per dependent. It ensures worker safety by requiring OSHA at long last, something they should have done from day one, to issue strong enforceable standards to require all workplaces to develop and implement infection control plans based on CDC guidelines. And it preserves health coverage. This is crucial. How many Americans have lost their employer-provided health insurance because they've lost their jobs? Hundreds and hundreds of thousands and millions of Americans. This bill allows unemployed Americans to receive the maximum ACA subsidy on the health care plans on the exchanges automatically. And finally, it restores unemployment benefits, the extra weekly $600 that basically kept this economy afloat for the early months of the pandemic, extends that out through next January. So it's long past time for the Senate to act. And, you know, I'm sorry, the president can tweet all he wants. Yesterday, he said no more negotiations. In the night, he tweeted about certain specific things he says we should do. Well, the Senate just needs to get in the game and pass a bill that protects our heroes, protects our families, stops the spread of the pandemic. I'm not going to put up with the president trying to cherry pick aid for one kind of industry or another. Here we've got Mayor Taylor, Ebony, Carey, representing our cities, our nonprofits, our businesses. We need to do this in a rational way that actually helps the American people. So with that, Jenny, let's move to our speakers, and let's start with the mayor of the great city of Sterling Heights, who's done such an incredible job of dealing with this pandemic, Michael Taylor. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you for convening this press conference. And on behalf of the residents of Sterling Heights, we want to thank you for your leadership in representing us and helping to whether it's connect small businesses to the right federal agency so they can pivot their business and continue employing their employees and providing their customers with products. We've been lucky to have you, and so thank you. I do want to just speak very briefly about the urgent need in the city of Sterling Heights. I can tell you from talking with ordinary residents and citizens and talking with small business owners, talking with representatives from large businesses. We have 4 automotive plants, 2 FCA and 2 Ford plants in Sterling Heights. We've got major defense contractors. We've got major tier 1 suppliers and automotive suppliers. And we need relief, not just for ordinary citizens, but for small and large businesses. And we need relief for cities like the city of Sterling Heights. We all know that without some sort of economic stimulus to continue what was done earlier in the spring, that our ordinary residents that either need to pay rent, pay their mortgage, need to put food on the table for their families, they are struggling right now. I'm a parent with 3 small children. All 3 of my children, kindergarten, 3rd grade, and 5th grade, are at home right now trying to go to school. My wife is trying to run our household and get all of them accommodated. It's an impossible task. If you add on the stress of having to figure out where you're going to get your next paycheck and how you're going to pay your bills and how you're going to put food on the table for your kids, it's an overwhelming situation. That's being felt by our residents. It's being felt by our small businesses that are squeezed. They're doing the best that they can to provide accommodations, whether it's moving seating outside for restaurants, whether it's installing plexiglass for nail salons, whatever they can do, they're doing, but they're spending more money to keep their employees and their customers safe, and they're getting less revenue because the restrictions that they have to go through. So it's vitally important that we get some package done. And I think the president's message, he's you never know what he's saying. We don't know what to believe. And when I talk with residents, when I talk with small businesses, the most important thing for them is certainty. In an uncertain future, what can we be certain about right now? And we don't know. Watching his Twitter feed, we don't know whether he wants to negotiate, whether he doesn't want to negotiate. He says he's going to wait until after the election. Then he says that the need, as the Federal Reserve Chairman said, is great. He agrees with that. We need a single voice coming from the White House saying we're committed to helping people like the residents of small businesses in Sterling Heights. And what I want to end on is this. Not only do our residents and do our businesses need assistance, the city of Sterling Heights and municipalities like Sterling Heights need this help too. We need to see a new round of stimulus that includes cities like Sterling Heights, cities that have less than 500,000 in population, so that we can continue providing the services that our residents and our businesses need. We need to be able to continue doing road work. We need to be able to continue inspecting our underground infrastructure. We need to be able to continue providing clean water. We need to be able to continue providing police services, fire services. Our first responders are stressed. They're in a very difficult situation right now, and they're providing services admirably under the hardest of circumstances. And this continued economic depression threatens cities' viability going into the future. So we need to see that stimulus coming to cities as well, so we can support those services, because without those services, businesses and residents will suffer as well. So we call on the president, call on the White House, we call on the Treasury Secretary, and we call on the leadership in the Senate to get back to work. Do what you can. I know there's been an outbreak in the Senate of COVID, and our thoughts and prayers are with everybody impacted by this terrible disease. But we need action. And so I'm calling on all of our congressional leaders and the administration to do what is right for the American citizens, do what's right for cities like Sterling Heights. And again, thank you, Andy, for allowing me to just share some brief remarks.
Thank you so much, Mayor Taylor. And next we will hear from Ebony Taylor of Mothering Justice, who advocates for our working families and our working moms here in Michigan and nationwide.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, we have a couple of Taylors here. Hi, and thanks for this opportunity. Thanks again for this opportunity to speak at this press event in support of this COVID-19 relief package. Again, my name is Ebony Taylor, and I am the Michigan Executive Director at Mothering Justice. We're a nonprofit organization focused on issues that impact mothers of color. We have a mama's agenda that currently focuses on 4 issue areas: paid family leave, Black maternal health and quality, affordable childcare, and safety net. And as Congressman Levin mentioned, the health and economic needs of most Americans have only increased as this pandemic continues. So this May and June, Mothering Justice, along with the National Women's Law Center, commissioned a statewide poll here in Michigan, surveying the impacts of COVID-19 on women of color. 67% were African-American women, and the other 33% were of Hispanic, Latinx, Asian American, Middle Eastern, and North African descent. And we found that 8 in 10 women of color in Michigan reported being impacted by COVID-19. 2/3 reported being affected financially by COVID-19, including a reduction of work hours, getting furloughed, losing their job, and being forced to quit to care for someone else. For women of color in households with children, 4 in 10 were essential workers, and most of them do not feel safe at work. About 1/3 of business owners reported losing clients or revenue, while 1/4 reported that they were forced to close. More than half of the people who responded to our statewide poll said that they fully support strengthened unemployment protections, additional direct cash payments, increased funding for child care programs, increases to SNAP, and lower barriers to access support programs. These results for us at Mothering Justice only confirmed that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed broken social and economic systems, right? While also deepening racial and gender inequities. In the US, the economic fallout is disproportionately, and certainly we're seeing that here in Michigan, but hurting women's economic security and continues to devastate women-dominated sectors like the service industries like childcare, hospitality, home care, and healthcare. The updated HEROES Act will put attention to these issues by providing additional direct payments, cushioning the economic blow of the coronavirus crisis with a more robust second round of economic impact payments of $1,200 per taxpayer and $500 per dependent, expanding access to emergency paid leave to healthcare workers, the first responders that we just got finished talking about, workers at businesses with fewer than 50 employees, and workers at businesses with 500 or more employees, allowing workers to take emergency paid sick leave and emergency paid family and medical leave for a wider range of circumstances to reflect the challenges workers and families are facing during this pandemic. Allocating $50 billion for the Child Care Stabilization Fund to ensure child care providers are able to stay afloat during temporary periods of low enrollment and have the resources to continue serving children and families in a safe environment. Most notably, Congressman Levin's COVID-19 WIC Safety and Modernization Act will modernize the Women, Infants, and Children program. WIC currently requires participants to be physically present when purchasing items, while food insecurities have doubled since the start of the pandemic, with 40% of mothers with children under 12 suffering from food insecurity and no option to order food online or curbside. The WIC Act also provides emergency relief to help school meal and children and adult care food programs to continue serving children and families. Establish a task force. The WIC Act also would establish a task force to recommend updates to WIC programs that provide convenient, safety, and equitable access to food and other safe purchasing methods. And lastly, it nearly triples the value of the WIC cash value voucher for women and children over a 4-month period, and provides $400 million for WIC to fund the increased benefit. So I'll end by saying that at Mothering Justice, we are committed to keeping these issues uplifted and keeping our ear to the ground around how mothers are impacted by COVID-19. We hope that our government can do the right thing and pass the updated version of the HEROES Act. And we just want to say thank you, Congressman Levin, for your leadership around this. We really do appreciate it. We see it, and we certainly stand in support of it.
Thanks, Ebony.
Thank you so much, Ebony. And next we'll hear from Carrie Denha, who is the owner of the Magic Bag Theater here in Ferndale, Michigan, and who has been bringing to light what our venue operators are facing, both in the press and on his marquee right there on Woodward Avenue. And we're so grateful to have him with us today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. I'd like to start by running down our last week of operation at the Magic Bag. On Tuesday, March 10th, Oakland County had its first confirmed COVID case. The next day, March 11th at the Magic Bag, we had a sold out show. We had blues guitarist Christone Kingfish Ingram, and almost 80 people didn't show up. The day after that, March 12th, we had Squirrel Nut Zippers, another sold out show where 30% of the crowd didn't show up because of the COVID scare. I decided to shut down the club after March 12th, after the Squirrel Nut Zipper show, because I didn't feel it was safe. That was knowing we had a sold out show coming up just 2 days later on Saturday, March 14th. Saturday, March 14th was also the same day that I came down with mild COVID symptoms. Nothing that would keep me from working. 12 days later, I was in the hospital. When I checked in, I couldn't recite from memory my name or birth date. It's only 7 months later that I'm regaining my faculties. I told you all of that to say this. If we had opened that day, I personally would have been responsible for causing a super spreading event infecting my staff, patrons, and the musical act. There's no safe way for venues to currently open. So let me explain this a little bit further if you're unfamiliar with the venue's business model. I'll break it down. Venues are typically only open to the public 4 to 5 hours on an event day. All of your costs are front loaded. You have to make up the entertainment cost, the associated show costs of producing the show, and the venue costs. So here's a simple example. Let's say you contract entertainment for $5,000. In the deal, the band gets hotel rooms, that's an additional $500. They get hospitality, that's an additional $200. So now your cost is at $5,700. Let's say they have an opening act, which most bands do. The total is now $6,000. Adding to that, you have the cost of the club, costs and ads, promotion, insurance, licensing, BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, staffing, etc. So now your costs jump up to $8,500. So here's your best case scenario if your room holds 350 people. If tickets are $30 and you're just about sold out, even though the majority of the shows don't sell out, your gross is $10,000. After you pay everyone out, you may have $1,500 in promoter profit for the venue for all of your work. The venue is the last to be paid. Typically 65 to 70% of the ticket gross goes towards the cost of talent. The last portion goes towards the venue's expenses, and whatever is left over is the promoter profit on your show. You can see on a typical evening of operations, you must have the bodies. You must have a large number of people for the numbers to work. Keep in mind, in my example, I haven't figured the cost for PPE or anything extra to keep customers safe. I just wanted to keep it simple. So that's the model and how it all works. Right now, during Michigan's reopening, we could have about 80 people inside the Magic Bag by our new guidelines set by our state. In the pre-COVID world example I gave you, the break-even point was 283 people, just to break even. You're not making any money whatsoever, just to break even. At 20% the capacity, the math doesn't work. Customers are not going to buy a ticket that's almost 3 times as expensive. Now, if I follow CDC guidelines with social distancing, my capacity goes to 28 people. That means my ticket price has to be $303 just to break even, assuming that people want to pay $303 for something that used to cost $30. Everyone at my club has been furloughed. The mortgage, the taxes, insurance, utility, liquor license costs all still have to be paid. As you can see, you can't bump up the ticket prices into the stratosphere because not only is it not fair to the customer, but they're not going to pay it. Artists don't play for free as there are costs associated with touring, and it's how they make a living. Venues are still expected to pay 100% of our costs. Currently, opening is a surefire way to nosedive headfirst into the red unless you can come close to full occupancy. We are nothing like a restaurant. There is not a carryout option for venues. The vast majority of tours across the US all have canceled or moved to next year. So there isn't even an inventory to book if we were ethically able to do so. We are currently in a lose-lose situation. The PPP program doesn't work for venues because you can't open. There are no employees to bring back. There isn't any work. Streaming shows are far from a viable revenue stream. We are taking on massive loans and debt to try to make it to the other side of this pandemic. Basically, it's like taking on a second and third mortgage while being unemployed. We're drowning. There are a whole host of issues I can go into, but I think this illustrates our unique position that's happening across the whole US. The whole industry infrastructure is crumbling. For every dollar spent on a concert ticket at a small venue, $12 of economic activity is generated for area businesses like restaurants, retail shops, and hotels. The investment will pay off for communities and workers in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. We are economic engines in our community, and we drive business into our respective cities. Entertainment venues are among the first to shutter when the closures began, and will be near the last to reopen, with 90% of venue owners, operators, and bookers reporting they will close permanently without additional financial assistance. And we face an estimated $9 billion in losses should ticket sales not resume until 2021. We have zero revenue coming in, zero. And the Save Our Stages Act would provide a much needed support for these venues. My name is Kerry Denha. I'm the owner of the Magic Bag in Ferndale, Michigan, right outside of Detroit. Thank you to Congressman Levin and his team for giving me this opportunity. And thank you for truly listening and your careful consideration. Please help us.
Oh, Kerry, thank you so much for sharing your story. At this time, if we have any questions from the press, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll also look at the chat if you would like to raise your hand there.
Hey, Nick, go ahead. I see you.
All right, thanks, Congressman, for holding this. So I had a question for you about the current state of stimulus negotiations and the president's tweets from last night about them. I know we're talking here about this comprehensive package and the need for that and the need for state and local aid, but the president is signaling his support for standalone bills about stimulus checks and airline relief. So I was wondering if that were something to come up in the House, would you support such a proposal?
Thanks, Nick. That's a really important question. I just don't think it makes sense to cherry pick. The president can talk about one industry or another, but we have seen devastation across hotels, entertainment, airlines, mass transit, rail, all manner of transportation, all manner of hospitality, manufacturing, all throughout this economy. You just can't cherry pick one or two industries. We've got to do our best to help the American people in a rational way, and we're going to try to negotiate something that works for the entire country.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Nicholas. Do we have anyone else?
It's so crazy with these boxes, well, you don't know who's there and who's not, who's just recording.
Yeah, I took it off of speaker view so I could see everybody this time. Andy, do you have any questions or follow up?
Mayor Taylor, representing our local governments, Ebony Taylor representing our moms, our most vulnerable people, our babies, our young children, and really our families struggling to make ends meet in this pandemic. And then Kerry Denha representing our small businesses. And just what a story you told, Kerry. I mean, my hat comes off to anybody who every day risks losing their shirt by putting out music acts or comedy acts. They don't know if they're even going to break even. And that's pre-COVID. And now their business has been totally devastated because of a pandemic that isn't their fault or any of our faults. But here's the thing about this pandemic. We can respond. We can take a look at the health risks, take a look at the spread, take a look at the impact on our economy and on the livelihoods and lives of the American people. And we can put together a relief package that actually meets the need. If it has to be a compromise, sign me up, but it's got to meet the needs of the American people. And you know what? I just want to stress something. We've done this. We've passed several relief packages on a bipartisan basis to come to the aid of the American people. By now, economists across the spectrum say, if it wasn't for the CARES Act and the other legislation we passed, the devastation would have been way, way worse. So, Mr. President, Senate Republicans, please, let's get in the game, join us at the negotiating table, and let's come to terms on a package that does justice to the American people. Thanks, everybody.